No, it's just mints. Hey, happy Friday. JD Gagnon here with my good friend Kiara. And we are doing our fourth installment of FU Fridays. And it's kind of a joke, of course, but
it's only sort of a joke.
but we figured on Fridays, it's a good time maybe just to talk about some of the crazy claims that different people made about crypto, about blockchain, maybe some fear mongering from news outlets or incumbents in TradFi or different things. So every week, Fridays, we're going to try to spend 20 to 30 minutes dispelling, ideally, or just sharing some of the FUD and maybe getting people's feedback. So super excited. Kiara, what's on your mind?
No, just one of the inspirations for this actually was that in a previous episode this week, you noted that sometimes these rumors come out on Twitter and it takes 24 hours, 48 hours to sort of dispel them. Right. And I thought it would just be good to have a week wrap up where we can say, earlier this week, we talked about ABC from Twitter account XYZ, and here's what's come of that. And it's not actually that funny now that we're at the end of the week, and it kind of sets you up for a nice weekend.
Yeah. No kidding. You can tell you're Canadian because you just called it Zed instead of Z. But anyways,
I was thinking the other day that it just dawned on me that other people think it's Generation Z, and that's terrible. Gen Z is so much catchier.
Gen Z, that's what it is.
No way.
Holy shit. Okay, we're gonna need anybody that's watching this to chime in, and this will be one of those like never-ending polls. In 10 years from now, people are still going to be voting on whether it's Z or Z. Anyways, underneath this video. So this week, there's a couple things that we wanted to talk about, but I think first we will share something from a guy that I have a ton of respect for.
Absolutely.
And obviously is probably one of the best financial minds in the world. I just happen to completely disagree with their sentiment here. And I think it's in many ways unfounded, but I will just simply share my screen and play this video.
Yeah, no summary is going to do it.
Kara, you're gonna have to let me know if the sound is coming through strong here.
Just start. You're at 37 seconds. You've got to go back.
Exactly. No, this is where we want to start. This is essentially just breaking this down. Essentially, what happened is Charlie Munger has come out saying that it's really important to understand both sides of an argument, and be able to explain and dispel the opposing party's views as well as to state your own. And more or less, he's come out and said that anybody that would buy crypto, it's massively stupid, et cetera, et cetera. And he's definitely not been a supporter of blockchain and crypto. Now, I think he's got some really good points. But anyways, maybe we'll listen to his response here when she asked him to identify what the opposing arguments may be.
I don't think there are good arguments against my position. I think the people that oppose my position are idiots. And so I don't think there is a rational argument against my position. This is an incredible thing. Naturally, people like to run gambling casinos where other people lose. And the people who invented this crypto crapo, which is my name for it, and sometimes I call it crypto crapo, and sometimes I call it crypto shit. And it's just ridiculous that anybody would buy this stuff. And it isn't. You can think of hardly nothing on earth that has done more good to the human race than currency, national currencies. They were absolutely required to turn man from a goddamn successful ape into modern successful humans in human civilization. Because it enabled all these convenient exchanges. So if somebody says, I'm going to create something.
Yeah, that's probably enough. We can stop sharing that. But I mean, when you think about his position, I mean, again, he's got so much influence. He's on CNBC. When you talk about, perpetuating fear, uncertainty, and doubt, like what more successful way to do so than to have Charlie Munger on CNBC talking about something that arguably he probably doesn't understand. I mean, it's quite a bit outside of their lane as value investors. I mean, they invest long-term, large shares in ongoing businesses, large global businesses, and they, work with the founding teams or the management teams to, turn them into wildly successful organizations. I mean, it's a lot different in crypto. It's a totally different market. It's a totally different environment for them to participate. So you got to take sometimes what these people say. Another one that we should probably bring up is our friend, the gold bug, Peter Schiff.
Oh yeah.
And he's another one of those guys that like absolutely hates on crypto. And I mean, there's always a little bit of truth in everything that people say. Like, I mean, Charlie does have some interesting points, probably not directed exactly how I would direct them, but there's some work to do still, obviously. I mean, the value accrual and objective valuations of most crypto projects is somewhat questionable, or at least not straightforward. And I mean, he's got some points, but to call all things crypto and anybody that invests in blockchain and crypto idiots, I think is a very unfair blanket statement. Maybe as a result of this video, Charlie Munger will come on and we can debate the merits of crypto. That would be like the greatest thing that could ever happen, is to debate Charlie Munger about anything.
Introduce him to blockchain finance as opposed to crypto. Right?
And I mean, there's a lot of nonsense that exists in crypto. And so that's why, we talked about this again. Yeah. Who knew?
No.
Who knew? But we talked about this the other day. It's important. You have to listen. You have to at least give some attention to some of these claims, because there's always some truth. Even if it's hyperbole, there's probably some truth buried in there somewhere. And you need to figure out, is the truth this big or is the truth this big? And it's a big freaking problem. And so anyways, that's the first piece of FUD for FU Friday.
I think this is the epitome of FUD, actually, which is why I picked it. I don't want to make fun of Charlie Munger. He knows way more about investment banking than I do, right? I'm not trying to belittle his opinion or anything to that end. However, this is a major news publication asking somebody a question outside of their expertise and anticipating that they're going to have a meaningful answer. I mean, you can tell that it's out of left field for him, right? And he thinks about it. So if you actually watch the clip, he stops and he thinks about what he wants to say before responding, which very smart, but is important to note because he wasn't prepped for that question. So he probably didn't have a team of people coach him in how the blockchain works, right?
Yeah.
And so he can only express his personal opinion, which again is where a lot of FUD comes from. And we've talked about fear mongering. We've talked about the polarization. We've had a busy week.
Yeah, we're just getting going. We're just starting. But I mean, it's important because human nature also is generally to pick apart the things you're not involved in favor of the things you are involved in. That's just common, because we can't naturally pay attention to everything as human beings. It's impossible. It's not feasible. But we can do our best to pay attention to what's most relevant. And when you think that, well, I don't want to go too deep philosophically here, but you have to think about, generally speaking, people's understanding, Charlie's understanding of the space. But what does he have to gain by understanding crypto and blockchain? I mean, there's no business of any scale. So it's easier for him, instead of having to pay attention to crypto and blockchain, and I don't know if this is the case, but just using this as a potential example, instead of having to pay attention to it and to form opinions and to really understand it, they've more or less just said, this is out of our realm of interest. And for that reason, we think it's stupid. And it's easier to just say, well, this is stupid, so that's why we're not doing it. When in reality, they could say, there might be merit to it. I just don't know. It's not in my core competency to understand that market, so I'm just going to stay out of it. Anyways, it'll be interesting.
Getting reactions on a hot topic gets views. So,
well, fear sells, right?
In one way, this is a little bit morbid, but working in crypto has made me really glad that my grandparents aren't still around, because every family dinner would be circled around exactly this type of topic, right? It would just be like so much unknown and so much fear for, my grandparents who were farmers and that kind of thing that they can't understand. right? And so the reason I bring that up actually is that we need to think about who's influencing us as well. And I don't mean exactly which news outlets, but who in our lives are influencing us and what are their core competencies, as you would put it, or what's their subject matter expertise. And should we allow that to influence what we're doing? If I started tweeting tomorrow about ceramics making, no one should pay attention, right? I don't know how to put things in a kiln. They use kilns in ceramics. And likewise, if Charlie Munger starts tweeting about crypto tomorrow, maybe we should send him a blockchain course, right?
Yeah, but I mean, we talked about how PR gets syndicated and these opinions get syndicated. And this is just one of those things that, like, now that CNBC or MSNBC or CNN or Fox Business or whoever airs this kind of stuff, all the other publications pick it up and assume that it must be true. It must be validated. It must be legitimate, even if it was and that particular show is a call-in. It's a call-in show where people call in and ask Charlie questions. So, I mean, they can't be prepared and they can't be scripted. And it's not necessarily been validated, but it gets syndicated. And so it's worth, I think, approaching that with a grain of salt. Anything that you hear from media publications, there's probably some truth to it. There's probably some hyperbole. And, you got to figure out where those two intersect. And that's pretty critical. I'm not sure if we should beat up on Charlie Munger anymore. We can maybe move on to some of the other beautiful FUD that we've seen.
I was going to say, what else you got, JD?
Well, I mean, obviously, we saw the news from Kraken earlier in the week and the SEC, and Gensler has been kind of going on a little bit of a video parade, releasing all these fairly highly produced videos. I mean, if it wasn't for, the videos actually aren't that bad. It's just it's very alarming to see kind of what he's saying and some of the positions that he's taking. Really have a significant impact potentially on what we're doing. But I think this whole thing about staking and about all of these potential staking enforcements and how that worked with the Kraken situation, they came out and more or less made it seem like, if you look at the original release, like Kraken was maliciously doing something. The SEC has tried everything to get them to come into compliance. And they decided, no, we're just going to, stop this product for US people and pay the fine and call it a day. And in reality, I mean, after you let it kind of settle for a couple of days, the management team from Kraken came out and said, hey, that's not exactly how it went down. I mean, we don't want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars fighting this for something that probably doesn't have the revenue trajectory that it would be worth, or that would substantiate that kind of spend. So we just paid the fine to make it go away, is more or less what happened. And Gensler also alluded to the fact that it's as simple as just going on the SEC website and filling out a form to become compliant. That's right. Unequivocally not the case. I mean, if that was the case,
we would all,
then everybody would be in compliance if it was that simple. But it's not that simple. And that's really where the meaningful work has to happen over the next, coming years, is trying to figure out how do we either identify that we don't need to worry about certain compliance because we're outside of that, or if we're inside of that, oversight regime, I suppose, then what is the process? How is there a manageable and achievable process to go through this? And so that one, I think there's been a lot of SEC stuff, which is to be expected, in the wake of Terra Luna and UST and, all of these centralized entities going bankrupt on the backs of, lack of due diligence for their lending, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of cries from the American public to do something. And the easiest way to do it is to try to, slap the hands of the people that have already broken blatant rules, which makes sense, but that still doesn't help the rest of us. Doesn't help the industry to say, okay, well, what does this mean? And so what news does and what sells is this fear, right? So if you read a lot of the articles, they completely mischaracterize what the SEC was actually saying and what that means for the market as a whole. And I don't have any perfect examples off the top of my head of that, but maybe we'll dig some up and use them. And
the other thing that was interesting was on Twitter, all of the false, just random tweets about other people also getting served by the SEC, that none of which happened.
Yeah, and most notably, was USDC and Circle.
Okay.
I mean, there was that spread like wildfire, and then all of a sudden you could see that the thing with blockchain that is very interesting as an experiment in human behavior, but it's so momentum driven and it's so narrative driven that even somebody reading something like that on Twitter causes like second and third order impacts in the markets, which is crazy. Like you saw USDC, people were exiting USDC as fast as they possibly could at that exact moment. Why? I'm not sure. A Wells notice is not, some sort of like official penalization. More or less just says they're looking at suing you. You have a chance to respond, but the market overreacts, generally speaking. And so, and it creates.
Don't talk about me like that.
Yeah. Well, no, everybody does, right? Like, and because the contagion, like there's some amazing things in blockchain and crypto due to composability, and just the technical nature of how smart contracts work. That's really what some of the greatest innovation in the space is how you can build incredible structures on top of other existing technologies. And it's just one of the things I think that is people don't appreciate some of the meaningful benefits that provides. But the drawback is that contagion is potentially a lot worse. Something that happens 2 or 3 steps away from you in the space could in fact impact you or your protocol or wherever you have your assets, even though the initial trigger had nothing to do with you or had nothing to do with your platform. So, I mean, there is some merit, I think, in people's panic, but it's just too reactionary. It's like a hair trigger, right? They're just sitting there waiting to.
Yeah. This week was really FUDdy in regulation, and
yeah.
I think we can just kind of blanket statement that. Did you see any like dumb FUD? Dumb FUD. Like last week or was it 2 weeks ago? Was the should you go private on Twitter?
That was ridiculous. One of the funny things that I saw in the last 24 hours is there's like on crypto Twitter, there's a lot of people that are doing that copy paste. Somebody says something kind of hilarious and then every other founder copy and paste it with respect to their own project. I saw a whole bunch that were talking about burning certain NFTs and making them live on Bitcoin for eternity. Yeah. But the NFTs that they were burning were like the rarest ones in all of these collections. So like the rarest Doodle, the rarest DGod, and then there was a myriad of them. And
wait,
again,
did you actually burn them and put them on Bitcoin?
No.
Wouldn't they be so much more valuable?
Yeah, of course they would. And it was kind of funny because they were like, the text or the copy for that post, at the end said I don't know if it's going to be a good decision, but in a long enough time horizon, it's going to be, financial freedom or some nonsense. But again, this kind of goes to show like the contagion effect. A lot of those projects, like there was other people chiming in and people claiming like wash trading and people talking about a whole bunch of nonsense that it just blows up. Like it kind of gets this life of its own. It started as a joke. A couple people maybe took it too seriously. And all of a sudden, a lot of these projects are impacted meaningfully. And I don't have evidence to say that stuff yesterday caused meaningful impact to any of the projects, but you can see a lot of the narrative, right? Like it took everybody's attention and they were laughing about, talking about, thinking about a joke, which is, again, kind of one of the points of go FUD yourself is to try to just discuss these things as objectively as possible, maybe dispel some myths if we can, and then try to help people make some form of assessment in terms of like, is this legit? Is this not? I don't know. Anyways, what about you? Did you see anything else? Anything else?
Not really. I saw the NFT Bitcoin stuff and some other similar things about moving other assets to BTC that were all jokes, right? I think it was a pretty focused on regulation sort of week. But going into the weekend, how are you going to shed your FUD and refresh for the week?
How am I going to shed my FUD?
Yeah.
Shit, I don't know. I don't feel very FUDdy, to be honest. I mean, if you've been around for a minute in the space, generally speaking, the marginal impact of all of these, like the world is coming to an end situations, it gets significantly reduced. Like very rarely when someone says crypto is going to zero, do I actually think, oh shit, crypto's maybe going to go to zero? Like the first few times that someone said that, I was like, oh my God, maybe it's going to go to zero in like 2015. Oh shit, China banned Bitcoin again. So, Mt. Gox happened. Oh shit, Bitcoin's dead. Crypto's dead. It doesn't really have that impact anymore. So I don't usually stress too much about it. But I do think, if you're looking at some of this stuff, from a strategic perspective, you want to look for like themes and trends, right? And think, okay, this might not impact me now, but will it in the future? And do I care, right? Like, am I worried about it? And so what I gather from this week is that there is a lot of activity that's starting to really happen in the space again, just on crypto Twitter. And, there's a lot of people having some fun. There's a lot of people, shilling some stuff again. And we're seeing a lot of these accounts that were quiet for a while coming back online. That's good. I mean, if for no other reason, then it's just good to get some positive sentiment into the space, even if it's on the back of some jokes and some other nonsense. But from a regulatory perspective, I think, it's something that we all knew. Like we all knew this was coming. And arguably, the regulatory challenges that invariably are in front of us, whatever they look like, in many ways have probably been priced in to a certain extent. Like as soon as Terra Luna happened and there was an announcement, was it this morning or yesterday, that the SEC is suing Do Kwon and Terraform Labs for securities fraud and a bunch of other things. And I mean, the writing kind of has been on the wall since then. Like it's pretty clear, and they've made pretty clear that obviously status quo isn't going to work. They haven't said what is going to work, which is, reason for some concern, I think. But anybody that's building in the space or anybody that's, participating in the space, it's not like it's going to happen tomorrow and completely, screw everybody over. There is a transitory period, but you should be paying attention, right? You have to look at some of these things and say, okay, what is Gensler saying? Because again, whether we agree with what he says or not, I mean, the SEC has the power to determine enforcement action. So, I mean, short of Congress passing laws, which I mean, takes a long, long time for that stuff to happen. The only way in the meantime is for them to try to enforce what laws they can apply. The challenge with that is they're enforcing a lot of securities laws on crypto right now. And if that continues, then that might be some path dependence for what future regulation actually looks like. And so it's important for us now, people participating in the space, to make sure that we have a voice as best we can. Talking to our legislators, lawmakers, people that represent whatever district you live in, whether it's in the US or Canada or anywhere else, really. And just letting them know, hey, like we're legitimate people building or participating in this space. And, we think that some of these rules might actually be a big problem. Anyways, and so it'll be interesting.
Okay, well, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, everybody. You guys have a good weekend.
F you and go FUD yourself. And
F you, go FUD yourself. And we'll see you all Monday, 12:30 Eastern, for more of this